Hi there, I'm Dr. Jeremiah Peck with Ally Academy Northwest, and welcome back to our video series on the National Counselor Exam, or NCE. And in this video, we're going to be looking at social and cultural diversity. Now, while there's a lot of best practices, skills, and techniques that can really help a counselor develop multicultural counseling competencies, within the scope of this video specifically, as we're examining social and cultural diversity as it relates to being one of the 8 core subject areas in the NCE, we're really going to be limiting our conversation to the content areas and the questions that very well may arise as you take the NCE. I won't be covering in depth skills and techniques as it relates to multicultural counseling competencies, in so much as those specific techniques may not arise in the exam itself. Now, foundationally, when you consider multicultural counseling and social justice, there are 2 fields of thought in regards to treating clients and helping them from a multicultural perspective. These 2 domains, so to speak, greatly influence the trajectory of the therapeutic relationship. And as such, these are 2 concepts that are likely to come up when you look at some questions in the NCE about social and cultural diversity. The 2 domains are autoplastic versus alloplastic. And autoplastic is when, as a counselor, you attempt to help the client cope with or otherwise conform to a specific cultural environment. This can be helping someone adjust, helping someone thrive, survive, function in a system that is different than their system of origin or system that they identify with. That's autoplastic. Alloplastic is when a counselor tries to help empower the client or give the client collaborative skills, techniques, tools, interventions to affect change in their context in some way that is meaningful for them in their cultural identity. So these 2 terms, autoplastic and alloplastic, may be terms or concepts that are alluded to or referenced in some of the exam questions as it relates to social and cultural diversity. There's also 2 more concepts that are helpful to understand from the basis of being the person of the counselor, and that is being an emic-focused counselor versus an etic-focused counselor. Now, emic, that's E-M-I-C, is when a counselor focuses on one culture that is primarily their own culture of origin or dominant culture. This is really often viewed as a pitfall in multicultural counseling competencies, where the counselor will try to look at the client through their own cultural lens. And this opens up the counselor to making assumptions, to perhaps pathologizing certain cultural experiences that the client may be going through. This is in contrast to being an etic counselor, E-T-I-C, where you can focus instead not on majority culture or viewing clients through one cultural lens, but being able to perceive and appreciate cross-cultural differences as well as similarities. Another concept that would be exceedingly helpful to be familiar with is that of cultural identity development. Specifically, you may encounter questions on the National Counselor Exam which bring up scenarios in which a multicultural or ethnic client is navigating some of their experience as it relates to having a unique cultural identity within their specific context. There's a 5-stage racial and cultural identity development model that is often applied to these specific scenarios. The 5 stages are conformity, dissonance. The 3rd stage is resistance and immersion. 4th stage is introspection, and the 5th stage is integrative awareness. Within these stages, it's theorized that the client, as they experience being in a cultural context that is different than their culture of origin or their racial background of origin, that they're going to move through these stages, which entails a different way of them experiencing their context, as well as how they experience themselves. For instance, in the initial stage, the conformity stage, the individual may lean towards over-identifying with the culture they're attempting to conform with, even to the extent where they have a negative attitude towards their culture of origin, and even a negative attitude towards themselves as it relates to the characteristics of that culture of origin. It's theorized here with this model that leads to some experience of dissonance, which then progresses further down these stages as well. So you'll see that as the person progresses through the model, they develop an appreciation for both the culture they find themselves in, as well as their culture of origin. There's a vacillation between the two. In the third stage, where there's resistance, they can experience the dissonance of not desiring to harbor negativity towards their culture of origin and have resistance towards the idea of conformity. So then they may flip and have some negativity then towards majority culture. Ideally, in this model, it's framed as the fifth stage of integrative awareness, being that of the person being able to appreciate the unique differences of culture, being able to have an identity rooted in their own culture of origin and values, while still being able to operate in and appreciate being in a culture different from their own. So this is that 5-stage racial and cultural identity models. Anything really related to the impact of someone's heritage, culture, attitudes, beliefs, experiences. We often talk about phrases like lived experience in this topic. So when you hear these terms, this is likely a question that is having to do with social and cultural diversity. Also, another topic that is explored in these questions on the NCE are questions related to power and privilege, particularly as they relate to marginalized and majority experiences. So expect questions regarding socioeconomic status or educational status, in addition to racial, cultural, gender, age, factors as it relates to someone experiencing any form of marginalization in their lived experience. That marginalization on this privilege versus oppression spectrum may then be situational to the question, as the question may be asking what facet of privilege or oppression might the counselor need to be aware of about the client's experience, and then ask you to wrestle with that and find the best response. It's also worth noting that cross-cultural clients may have different help-seeking behaviors, or may have different routes and avenues, or even values surrounding seeking out professional counseling services. Part of the social justice or advocacy side of multicultural counseling is being aware of what those resistances or different behaviors might be surrounding help seeking, and engaging in ways to dismantle barriers or to address barriers to marginalized populations accessing care. It really is as such that there are a number of experiences that individuals can go through that can serve as barriers to them accessing mental health services or resources within their community. So in so much as the help-seeking behaviors of diverse clients is important, counselors ought to be engaged in ways of reaching those clients in ways that resonate with them in their lived experiences. Another aspect that comes up in the context of cultural diversity is that of religious diversity. So when you see questions related to faith or religion or spirituality, this is when models like Fowler's stages of faith and spiritual development, it's a 6-stage model that may come up in the questions as well. Just briefly, Fowler begins with stage 1, which is an intuitive projective faith, often categorized with ages 2 to 7. A mythic literal faith is the stage after that, which is really in the whole childhood and on phase. A synthetic conventional faith is marked by conformity to group identity. This is marked in adolescence. If you note, in reference to human growth and development, there would be some parallel here, by the way, with Erik Erikson's 8 stages of social and culture, or of psychosocial development, where the adolescent stage is really focused on identity and belonging. Well, here in the 3rd stage of Fowler's faith and spiritual development, the adolescent stage of synthetic conventional faith also really highlights what social conformity looks like. Do I believe in a way that is consistent with my social group, with my peers, and the formation of their faith may be influenced by their social context to a wider degree and extent than in previous stages. Stage 4 is the individuative reflective faith. This is the young adult period when an individual really tries to individuate their beliefs and find their unique spiritual, religious, or faith practice and belief system. From 30s on is a conjunctive faith, where someone is more open to the ideas and viewpoints of others. And it's theorized here with Fowler's model that from the midlife on is more of a universalizing faith, where someone can have both an appreciation for, an openness to other forms of spirituality, but still have some measure and openness to having sincere convictions of their own. Other questions that you will likely encounter, in addition to social factors, cultural factors, racial factors, things related to privilege and oppression, and even faith, spiritual, and religious experiences, are some specific postures for the multiculturally competent counselor to engage in. The last concept that I want to share with you is the concept of cultural humility. It's as such that in the literature, cultural humility is a posture of a multiculturally competent counselor. Cultural humility is an openness to an individual's unique lived experience. It positions the other as the expert of their lived experience. The counselor is not the expert by virtue of their position, by virtue of their training, but instead, the client, the one who has the lived experience, continues to really be the expert of that lived experience as it relates to their culture, their race, their spirituality, their gender, their age, their socioeconomic status, and so forth. It postures the counselor not to be in an authoritative power over position, but instead a power to, or rather a power with position that is collaborative. It is empowering to the client, and it is one that honors the client's lived experience and worldview. It's one that ethically does not impose the values of the counselor onto the client. Now, these are just some broad categories and terms and concepts as it relates to the National Counselor exam that you'll likely see on some of your test questions. I would encourage you to continue to brush up on these, as well as specific tools and techniques in order to further develop your professional experience surrounding being a multiculturally competent counselor. This is just one video in a series where I am examining the different content areas of the NCE. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'd encourage you to check out some of our other videos on this topic as well. Bye for now.